Hey guys, I'm John Ribs. I'm a Twitch streamer slash YouTube content creator, D&D player, strategy game player, worked on XCOM, play a lot of Slay the Spire very well, played Magic competitively, played poker competitively. That's me. Today I'm going to be explaining Total War Warhammer 2 to you. So if you're a new player who wants to know all about a lot of the mechanics in this game and how to be thinking about them, or if you're a fairly experienced player who just wants to, iron out some understandings of some of the minutiae of the game, hopefully this video is going to be a very natural, enjoyable watch, which teaches you a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to be playing the first turn of a campaign. We're going to be playing the Mortal Empires campaign, which is a free DLC campaign if you own Total War Warhammer and Total War Warhammer 2, and it sort of stitches the two games together into one world. It's a massive, massive campaign.
We must preserve this world.
And there are obviously a huge number of different lords we can choose between.
Do not waste my potential.
We're going to be playing Balthazar Gelt, and the reason that I'm choosing Balthazar Gelt is he's a wizard. He starts with a cavalry unit and an artillery unit. He's Empire, which means that economically he's pretty normal. There are a lot of factions which play sort of like Empire does in terms of how do you afford to build buildings, how do you afford to raise an army. There are some very unique factions in this game as well for whom rules will be a bit different. And so Balthazar Gelt's just a great opportunity to get access to most of the mechanics that matter in the game on the first turn. I'm probably just playing one turn here. The video is probably going to be an hour or more. There's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about as we look through this turn and just see all the different mechanics going on. I won't be talking too much about lore, but the Empire is a, neutral good faction, I would say. I shouldn't be talking about lore, that's probably not even true. In the Warhammer world, this is a human faction. They're based sort of on the Holy Roman Empire in terms of actual world history. And yeah, we're basically in the storyline. A new emperor has just been elected. There's some dispute amongst the Empire over whether they should follow him or not. Balthazar Gelt is one of his advisors, sort of. He's the high wizard for Karl Franz, who is the emperor. And right at the start, we have to deal with first killing these Empire secessionists who are actually at war with us and taking control of our starting province properly. These 1, 2, 3, 4 settlements make up our starting province. And then from there, we can look at how are we going to ally the rest of the Empire together and have a good base of power. Practically speaking, I actually usually go kill Bretonia with the Empire, but we won't get super into that. But as an aside, as you get more and more comfortable with this game, you'll start to notice that the things that the campaign is telling you might want to do narratively or from a lore perspective may not actually be the most favorable things to be doing in terms of what will win you the game the fastest. So, Balthazar Gelt. We're starting out with a wizard lord, so this guy has some spells and things. We'll get into that in combat. Great swords, swordsmen, spearmen. These are our melee core of our army. The great swords are actually a tier 3 melee unit, so they're very powerful at the start of the game, whereas the swordsmen and spearmen are just run-of-the-mill tier 1 units. Crossbowmen, so one ranged unit. Outriders are mounted cavalry. They're more competent at ranged damage than they are at attack and defense, but we can use them to charge into an enemy's rear to try to break the enemy in a pinch. And then a mortar unit, which is our artillery unit. What we're going to be doing this turn is basically moving this army to attack this army of Empire secessionists. They have 6 units. They're not nearly as powerful as ours. It will be an easy fight to win. Let's talk about some other stuff that's going on in the game first, though. We have a technology tree. I don't actually think every faction has a tech tree at all, but most factions have a tech tree of some sort. Some are more involved than others. For our tech tree, we actually have to build some buildings to unlock technologies, so we won't be getting super into this, but at the start of any campaign with a new faction, you're going to want to look at the tech tree and get an idea of what's out there, what you might want to be building towards. The Empire typically gets a rally field first, because that's the most accessible building for recruiting troops. And so you can look and see, oh, I can get some stuff for my infantry units. That's pretty cool. And then you can look, 10% income from ports, 5% income from trade. Here's a way to get my economy going better. Maybe we want to build toward that. Stuff like that. The Empire is interesting because it doesn't have a linear tech tree where like you research this, and then you research this, then you research this. The Empire is very much about which buildings did you build, and whichever building you build unlocks corresponding technologies. The other thing that's going on that I want to look at in these buttons, okay, we'll look at all of them actually. Diplomacy in this game. Let's sort by attitude to start. So, as the recently elected Emperor's faction, you see in diplomacy, I'm actually Karl Franz, who is the Emperor, even though I'm controlling Balthazar Gelt in the campaign. We have, decent relations with a lot of Empire provinces here. Bretonia, these are our human neighbors to the west. We have pretty good relations with them. In negotiating with other factions, we have many different agreements that we can make in Total War, Warhammer 2, and Warhammer. Non-aggression pact, trade agreement, military access, defensive alliance, military alliance, join confederation. We can also ask them to go to war with us against somebody. We can ask them to break one of their non-aggression pacts with somebody we don't like very much. We can ask them to basically break their stuff. We can ask them for money. And this is actually a really big point, because if we are, say, signing a non-aggression pact and we think that they want it more than we do, maybe, we can demand payment along with it. Try to get 300 gold. Baros Todbringer's not so into that. The game will give you an idea of how interested they are in different proposals based on the color of this hand holding a scroll. And typically speaking, these diplomatic statuses run from the top to the bottom in terms of how easy it is to sign them with somebody. So the non-aggression pact's the easiest thing to get, with a little bit of variety there. Trade agreement might be easier to get if the trade agreement happens to benefit both of you a lot. Join confederation. This actually takes control for you of all of Baras's provinces and armies. This might be easy to do if Baras is very, very weak and about to get killed by somebody or something like that. He might be happy to join your confederation in that situation. But in general, we go from top to bottom. And we also get benefits diplomatically. Let's look at somebody who we do have a non-aggression pact with. We're getting 15 bonus on our relations with Kislev from having our non-aggression pact with them. So a general pattern of diplomacy is you try to work out how to get a non-aggression pact signed. Maybe you give them a gift, so we can just offer them like a small gift of gold, and this will give them a relationship boost with us over the course of a few turns. Maybe we declare war on somebody they don't like, or defeat armies of somebody they don't like. You can see here, past war with Warriors of Chaos is giving us a 5 bonus. So before this campaign started, Kislev and I were both at war with Warriors of Chaos, and so they like me because of that. Once you get your non-aggression pact signed, you can start looking at a trade agreement, and that's all cool. A very tricky thing in diplomacy in this game is that if you have a non-aggression pact or a trade agreement, actually, and you declare war on somebody, you get a massive diplomacy hit, worldwide. Right now we have steadfast reliability, and if we attack somebody we have a non-aggression pact or a trade agreement with, that's going to go massively down. Also, it takes a while to fix that. If we have a non-aggression pact with someone and we're like, oh, we really need to kill them, we have to wait until the non-aggression pact has been signed for, I believe, 10 turns. And then when we break it, we have to wait, I believe, another 10 turns before we can actually attack them. My numbers may be incorrect on that, but the concept is it's taking a long time to get ourselves out of a pact in order to declare war on someone. And the reason I'm harping on this, and the reason it's so important, is that as you progress through these diplomatic relationships, military access is fine, but once you get into a defensive alliance or a military alliance with somebody, if I have defensive alliances and military alliances with multiple different people, and they start declaring war on each other, there is no action I can take that can maintain my reliability. If somebody I have a military alliance with attacks somebody I have a defensive alliance with, the person who I have a defensive alliance with will call me to join the war on their side, and the person I have a military alliance with will call me to join the war on their side. And I don't have an option there that keeps anybody happy. So a general pattern of diplomacy in this game, I would say, is to get your trade agreements with the people you don't want to declare war on. That will give you benefit economically. Military access is fine, sure, but be very careful about signing defensive alliances or military alliances with other factions. Maybe only focus on one faction at a time in terms of who you are allied with in that way. Maybe look for like 2 or 3 factions who are spread far out and you don't think have reason to declare war on each other. But be very, very careful about, you can sort of ruin an entire campaign by making yourself unreliable in terms of diplomacy and then being unable to do diplomacy any more effectively by getting a little bit too aggressive with getting defensive and military alliances. So that's the diplomacy stuff that's going on, and in general, I'm going to let you decide based on your campaign what you want to be doing. Getting extra gold from signing agreements, which people are happy to make with you early in the game, can actually be a really big deal for getting your economy rolling in the first like 5-10 turns, so keep an eye out for that. I can actually show you the chapter objectives, but how campaigns are built is that you have like a turn or two maybe, which is sort of tutorialized, like this one. The game is showing us which army to go fight. And then you open up your chapter objectives, and I believe that at least most of the campaigns are built into 5 chapters, and as you complete each chapter objective, you'll be given a bunch of gold. Something to watch out for in completing these chapter objectives is, 1, there are bonus objectives. If you go in here and you go to your chapter objectives, you can click a button and it will show you bonus objectives, and you may want to try to complete some of those along the way in your chapter. You may even want to delay completing the chapter a little bit until you get more of the bonus objectives done for a little bit more gold. And as you progress through the chapters in your objectives, it gives you a diplomacy hit as a great power. The further through the chapter objectives you are, the larger the diplomacy hit is, and it's with almost every other faction in the game. It is possible for a faction to respect great power and not mind that you're great power, but otherwise, everybody's going to be upset with you if you're completing your chapter objectives. If we look at Baris Toddbringer, we've got a bunch of like 14s, 10s, a minus 15 for aversion, because Baris doesn't like us very much. If we get to chapter 3 or 4, we're going to be looking at a minus 40 or a minus 60. It's a big deal. So that's something you need to be keeping in mind for diplomacy, that it's going to be harder and harder as the campaign goes on to keep these relationships happy. I'm playing on very hard difficulty, by the way. It's possible that some of these numbers are different on lower difficulties, and I don't know, because I haven't actually played lower difficulties.
I am ready. Are you?
Okay. We're almost ready for the fight, but one other thing that I want to look at, I'm not going to look at offices because they are unique somewhat to the Empire. You can look at those yourself if you're playing an Empire campaign. We want to look at our province. So in Altdorf, we have our capital, and this is the city in our province that we control right now. Altdorf can get up to 10 slots for buildings. It has a unique port. This isn't actually a unique port. It has a port, which is a building that only cities on water get. So that's always going to be one of the buildings. We can't like get rid of the port. We can get rid of other stuff that's been built for us. So if we decide we don't want the training field, we can demolish it. That actually gives us 600 gold. Yay. And we don't have to worry about the training field anymore. We can do some of these other buildings. We have a resource in this settlement, a clay pit, so we may want to get that done. There are a bunch of infrastructure buildings which we may want. These give us more money, more casualty replenishment for units in our province, I believe. I think it's in our province, not in our settlement. So Altdorf is a settlement. Grunberg, Eilhart, and Helmgart make up a province, and the bonuses on these buildings apply to the province. So why would I want to delete the training field here? Altdorf is a city that can go up to tier 5, and it has some unique buildings in it, like the Altdorf College of Magic. We may want to get some of these tier 5 buildings built in this province. Now, Grunberg, Eilhart, and Helmgart are all minor settlements. They can only go up to tier 3. And you'll notice that the training field upgrades up to a tier 3 building, up to the barracks. Whereas something like the stables upgrades to tier 4. The gunsmith upgrades to tier 4. Or tier 5. This is a tier 5 building. This is a tier 5 building. These buildings are all going to be unavailable in the other settlements in the province. So we may want to get them in Reichland. Now, if we built the barracks in a different city, and we wanted to make greatswords, we would need to have an armory. As we mouse over greatswords, the game politely tells us this unit requires second building armory. And in general, in this game, if you mouse over stuff, the tooltips do a pretty good job of telling you what you need to know. But there's a lot of stuff to know, so it doesn't mean that it's easy to find everything out. There's just a ton of stuff going on. So we need an armory too. Okay. So we're building our barracks, and maybe we've decided to delete the training field and build in a different city so we have room for more stuff in Altdorf. The armory can be built anywhere else in the province. It does not have to be built in the same settlement as the one with the barracks. It's fine as long as we have an armory somewhere in the province. We're going to be able to make great swords out of the barracks, which we've built somewhere else in the province. So all of this adds up to thinking about provinces as a whole and working out how to maximize the output from them. Maybe I want a province where I recruit infantry and I build in all of the settlements that I can, a building which makes infantry recruitment in the province better. I build the highest tier infantry recruitment building in maybe my tier 5 city if the recruitment building goes up that high. Whether I'm Empire or another faction will change all of these things, of course, so you have to sit down and plan it yourself. Or, let's say I'm not doing that at all. Maybe I'm building an economic province. So we can build toll gates in every settlement of the province, plus 8% income from all of our buildings. We can build farms in all of the buildings in our province, and I think generally speaking, getting growth into your settlements early in the game is a very good idea to be able to upgrade. We need a certain amount of population in order to upgrade these. 1 population, 2 population, 4 population, 5 population. And that gets consumed whenever we upgrade. So growth is stored on a province-wide thing. Right now in this province, we have 0 out of 375 growth to get another population. If we just build this, now our province has 0 population, and we need 125 to get the next population. So building farms everywhere and using our population surplus in the province to get all of our settlements upgrading is good. And then we could build like toll gates everywhere. Altdorf has 50% income from all buildings in all regions in this province. That's like a special thing for the tier 5 building, and I mean it does it as well for the lower tier ones. We have a port, of course, and we have like pottery production. We could get all of these economic buildings built in a region, a tailor's guild as well for 500 gold per turn, and just stack up percentage bonuses on it. I talked for slightly longer than I wanted to about that, but the general idea is we can think about how we're using provinces and think about how the different settlements in the province can have like different jobs in terms of getting one of the buildings that we need for the province. and doing that efficiently to make a province very good. Typically speaking, you only need like a couple of provinces in this game to recruit units from, so if you get to a point where you have like 6, 7, 8 provinces, a lot of them could be focused primarily on economy, or maybe some of them are focused primarily on recruiting very good heroes, or something like that. Okay, let's get into combat, which is, in my opinion, combat is the most enjoyable part of this game. However, the reason that I just talked for 20 minutes about non-combat stuff is that I think the non-combat stuff is very important. Very important for setting up battles which you can win. So, as we go into this battle, we have 7 units, a lord, and 6 recruited units against 6 units of the enemy. Now, all of his guys are just tier 1 unexciting things. Crossmen are the tier 1 range units for the Empire. We got some swordsmen and some spearmen. So we have a much stronger army than he does. We're not too worried about winning this particular battle. However, sometimes you're in a situation where an enemy army is very strong, and you may want to know how can I beat it? So, first off, we can get up to 20 units in an army, and armies don't go larger than that in terms of size. So if they have 20 units, we get to 20 units. We can't recruit more units into our army to help. However, if we place 2 armies close to an enemy and then start the battle, our second army, which isn't starting the battle, can come in as reinforcements. And in fact, if you have 3, 4, 5 armies, they could all reinforce the battle. You can only have 40 units on the battlefield at the same time. So if you have like 80, 100 units in range of reinforcing the battle, what's going to happen is you'll get you'll get the first army to start, you'll have 20 units reinforcing that army, and then as units break or flee from the battlefield, units will reinforce to replace them from the other armies. So you can potentially just get a massive, 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 massive stack of units, and be in a situation where there isn't really anything in the game that could stand up to it. You're not probably going to want to do that because it would cost an immense amount of gold. The more units you have, the more armies you have, the more maintenance they require, and that like scales multiplicatively instead of linearly in this game. Buying another army adds a percentage increase to maintenance cost for all of your units. So it's going to be very expensive, and plus the world is so huge. There are so many things to conquer in this game. The campaign map is gargantuan. You saw all the different lords that I could start as. So having like 4 stacks of guys walking around next to each other is a very inefficient way to get that done. You can play around with ambush stats. You can play around with trying to trick the enemy into coming out of places where they are safe and able to get reinforcements themselves. That's something that I won't get too into in this video because I only have 1 army right now and we're on turn 1. If you're going to siege a city, weird things happen, and one thing that you can do is if an army is outside a city to reinforce the defenders of that city, you can place a siege on the city and then attack the army outside with a different army. And the besieged city won't be able to defend the army outside the city. It's actually a really big deal, because a city can have, a city will have maybe 10 garrison units and then a 20 stack in it, so that's 30 units, and it'll have a 20 stack outside it. And what you do in the situation, if you have 2 20 stacks, so you have 40 units and they have 50, you can engineer that to give yourself 2 favorable battles by besieging the city with one of your armies, attacking the outside army with the other. You'll have a 40 versus 20 fight. Likely the other army is going to retreat there, and what you'll do when it retreats is launch the siege against the city, and you'll have a 40 unit versus 30 unit siege, which you should win. And then they have a 20 stack still alive, which you can deal with however you want with your armies who are still healthy for the most part. What I just said is very important on the strategic layer to manage getting through settlements, so I know I didn't demonstrate it, but I just wanted to say it for you so you knew. Okay, let's talk about battle. Battle is what keeps me coming back to this game. I love the way that battles work. The strategic layer is a little bit like Civilization or Heroes of Might and Magic even, and the battles are sort of like StarCraft. It's like real-time strategy. You don't have to worry about like building buildings in the battles. You're just controlling your units, and there's a great rule set going on. The game cares about flanking, the game cares about line of sight, the game cares about exhaustion. There's so much stuff to talk about here, so let's get into it. Balthazar Gelt is a spellcaster, and anytime that we have somebody who casts spells, we're going to care about the winds of magic. In the Warhammer universe, this is the energy that gets used to cast spells, the mana, the magic, whatever. At the start of a combat, the game rolls a number between 5 and 25, so we rolled 14 this time, slightly below average. And we can choose whether or not to re-roll the dice to change that number. So on average, we'll get 15, and we got 14 this time, which means that on average, hitting the gamble button here will improve the amount of magic that we have available for us for this fight. That doesn't necessarily mean that we should hit the gamble button, though. Something to think about is, 14's an average amount, sort of, slightly below average. It's enough probably to win this fight with no trouble. Balthazar Gelt's going to get to cast his spells a bit. He's got Plague of Rust, which costs 4. He's got Searing Doom, which costs 6. And this is our starting value. We also have a power reserve of 60, and we're recharging 1 power per 6 seconds. So that's the recharge rate goes down as the battle goes on. You'll eventually be getting 1 power per 60 seconds, for example. But in general, we do have more than 14 power here. Our spells that are available only cost 6 magic and 4 magic. So we're going to be able to cast some stuff, no problem, if we have 14 starting mana. If we gambled and got 5, all of a sudden we're not really able to cast our things anymore, and maybe that actually hurts us significantly. Whereas if we gamble and get 25, is there really that much of an upside? Probably not. Probably 2 or 3 casts of Balthazar Gelt's spells are going to get us through the fight. So I'm not going to bother gambling there. Sometimes you might be in a situation where you desperately need a high roll and it's like time to just gamble it up. You might even re-roll a 16 because you're just like so out of your depth and you desperately need another spell cast to win the fight. Sometimes you'll be in a situation where it just doesn't matter that much and you're like re-rolling a 14 just because, sure, on average it gives me a bit more, etc. Okay, so we have a variety of units and some very interesting terrain to work with. We did attack the enemy, which means that we have to end the battle in 60 minutes or we lose, which in this case means that we retreat from the battle. Which means that, they could, hide somewhere maybe, but the thing is we have a mortar, and they don't, which means that if they go sit somewhere, we're going to, wheel the mortars up towards them. This is the range of the mortar being displayed. It's a very long-ranged artillery piece, and we'll just shoot at them until they're convinced that they should walk at us, basically. Crossbowmen have this range for comparison. Their crossbowmen, of course, are the same unit as our crossbowmen. We're fighting against Empire Secessionists, which means that we have mirrored units here to some extent. Okay. This game cares a decent amount about elevation. Elevation matters for a few reasons. One reason is if my crossbowmen are on top of this hill, a few things happen. I'm gonna pretend for right now that we're shooting at my outriders, even though it doesn't make sense that we'd be shooting at our outriders. I sort of need 1 more unit to deploy down there. Okay, I'm gonna use the hill this way so that I can explain everything that I'm talking about. Number 1 thing that happens is that our crossbowmen have this much range, and the outriders, when they go uphill, are going to struggle to charge uphill. They're going to get shot for longer. So that's super, super simple number 1 thing. That's pretty obvious. Charging uphill against ranged units is I think everybody's heard the stories about how badly that goes in historical combat. Thing number 2 that happens is we can put a unit right here in front of these outriders to block their charge, and our ranged unit is going to end up having line of sight over our unit. See how I can see their guys?
Crossbowman,
So we can very easily arc our fire over the friendly unit into the Outriders. And you can get this more and more clear. If we had our swordsman deployed there with this elevation, we've got a very clear line of sight, although I can't actually shoot that far. There you go. We're very easily able to shoot quarrels over our swordsmen and hit the Outriders. So we don't have to worry about friendly fire, which does exist in this game. The way that friendly fire works is that our guys are going to try to arc their fire over a unit if we're in a situation like this, where it's nowhere near as clear for us to see the enemy unit. They're going to try to arc their fire over our friendly unit if they have weapons which can arc appropriately. Crossbows do have the ability to arc, but something like a handgun does not arc nearly as well. So they're going to try to do that, and projectiles actually do get calculated individually in this game. So like this guy right here is going to try to shoot his crossbow, and he'll try to arc it up, but he might miss from it. It might land in the back of one of our swordsmen and kill one of our swordsmen. So getting the situation so that you're minimizing the chance of friendly fire using elevation is great. We can also I'm to move these around, by the way, because people always want to know when I do it. I'm holding the Alt key and left click dragging units, which I already have selected, and I can hit Control as well to rotate the formation that I'm dragging around. We can try to make the charge hit us this way. This is another thing that we can do. So we put our swordsmen here, we make them in the way of the Outriders. The Outriders are charging up and trying to get to our crossbowmen. They hit our swordsmen, they end up in combat looking something like this, vaguely. And we do have some ability to fire into their flank here. We can also relatively rapidly reposition our crossbowmen to here and just be firing into flanks and be getting a lot of damage dealt to the Outriders. So another thing that you can be thinking about is how to get flanking fire on enemies. Another common thing to do is to deploy in checkerboard. This is called a checkerboard formation. We have 2 melee units with ranged unit behind them. If enemies charge into us... Where did I just put my spearman? If enemies charge into us, often in this game you're going to be like outnumbered by enemy melee units and stuff. Like maybe they'll charge in here and the Outrider is going to come in and hit the flank of our greatswords. If this happens, we just automatically... We've been able to fire at the Outriders as they charge in, and now as they hit our flank, we just very easily have flanking fire against them immediately, no trouble at all. If they try to charge all the way through our ranks to hit our crossbowmen, we are going to pull our crossbowmen back. And imagine that this checkerboard line keeps going, because our battle is like 20 units instead of 7 probably. Most battles you're fighting are not 7 units. We pull our crossbowmen back, the Outriders move all the way in, they get in combat with our crossbowmen, but we've got another crossbowman unit right here for the next crossbowman unit over. We've got another crossbowman unit right here for the next crossbowman unit over, and they just rotate and shoot. And even though they've made contact with our range units, we have 2 range units dealing immense amounts of damage, shooting them into flank and rear. This unit is going to take way too much damage and break very rapidly. So that's a common way to do things. You can rotate your front to try to get flanking shots. You can use elevation to get clear line of sight on enemies. And all of these things are cool and good. Lots of manipulation going on for getting flanking fire against enemy units. I'm gonna set up with this hill here. Try to use the hill to my advantage. I'm going to try to use this little pocket where the elevation stops being so significant to deploy my melee units here and shoot my crossbowmen from the top of the hill over their heads into enemies they're engaged with. There are lots of ways you can deploy for this battle. As I said before, we expect to win the battle fairly competently. Our regular units can only deploy within the yellow line, which designates like our deployment zone, but our Outriders are actually allowed to deploy anywhere within the white line as vanguard deployment units. This is just a special trait that some units have. So I'm going to have them up here to harass the enemy as they move toward us. They're going to have to move toward us because of our mortar fire. And we've got our infantry down here. We'll talk about our infantry as the battle gets started. I just wanted to explain what's going on with line of sight, largely for ranged units. Alright, we're going to be pausing a bit in this fight too, so that I can... a bit was an understatement. So that I can talk about what's going on, why I'm doing different things, so on and so forth. Let's get our units set up here first. Alright. So, enemy units here, they've got one... Don't they have two crossbowmen? They only have one crossbowman. Wow, they only have one crossbowman unit. Spearman, spearman, swordsman, swordsman. What's going on with these units? This is a game where you can actually like read a bunch of stuff and it will tell you a lot of the things, not all of them, but a lot of them. Swordsmen are shielded, and that means that their shields here have a 35% chance of blocking small arms missile fire hitting the unit from the front. So if we're shooting our outriders into them from in front of them, 35% chance of that just getting blocked by a shield. This is a like brown shield. There are also silver shields, which give 55% chance in this game for like better units. So, okay, that's cool. That's simple enough. Swordsmen have 32 melee attack, 32 melee defense. Compare that to our spearmen. And you can see that our spearmen have significantly lower melee attack, slightly more melee defense. But in general, swordsmen are going to beat up our spearmen in combat. A way to think about melee attack and melee defense here is if units are completely even with each other, they'll have about 40% chance to hit. And then for every extra melee defense that a unit has, the other unit has 1% lower chance to hit it. For every extra melee attack that a unit has, it has 1% higher chance to hit the enemy. So if they're like even, they're canceling out at about a 40% base chance to hit. And then otherwise, I believe they're capped at 5% is the lowest chance you can have to hit, and 90 or 95% is the highest chance you have to hit. But for the most part, my understanding is that these are like linear bonuses to our chance to hit. And you could sit down with a spreadsheet and work out like if my unit has this much attack and this much defense, what chance to hit does it have against this unit with this much attack and this much defense, and that would all work fine. On very hard difficulty, units for the AI get bonuses to melee attack, melee defense, and leadership. Is that all? And reload speed, and they get lots of bonuses. So their unit's going to outperform us, but it's not by so much that we can't win this fights, and it's also not to a level where like the thing where you care about melee attack and defense goes away. It's just like their units have slightly better melee attack and defense than ours do, so we have to be clever working out how to do things. Alright, unpausing for a second just so that we could unpause for a second. Right now our outriders are just stopping their crossbowmen from advancing with their infantry line, which is actually fine. Like, if they shoot at our outriders a little bit across this tree line, that's okay. Their infantry are going to show up with no range support, and that'll be awesome. So, their spearmen are anti-large, which gives them bonus damage against large units. The only large unit on the field right now is our outriders, count as large. Entity and unit size. This is a unit of large entities. Yes. So, we don't want to be charging our outriders into their spearmen, basically, is the long and short of that. Units who have anti-large will deal bonus damage against large units. So after you roll to hit, you look at your weapon strength, work out how much damage you deal, and look at their armor to see how much damage they prevent. And spearmen are going to get a flat bonus to how much damage they deal. They're getting 13 bonus damage versus large units. Compare that to the 25 damage they had otherwise, and you can see that that's a significant amount. Weapon damage can be reduced by armor. The way that armor works is you reduce anywhere from half. Okay, so with 30 armor, I reduce damage by anywhere from 15 to 30%. So from half your armor to the maximum amount of armor %. And that's just based on a random die roll every time you get attacked. If I had 100 armor, I'd reduce damage from 50% to 100%. I'm not actually sure if there's a cap on that. I'm not sure if you have 200 armor if you reduce damage by 100% all the time for all the damage which armor can reduce. I don't know. Armor can't reduce all damage, obviously, because these guys are also dealing some armor piercing damage, and armor piercing damage just goes straight through any armor. So armor piercing damage is great, even against someone with only 30 armor that's dealing something like 30% more damage on average than non-armor piercing damage is doing. And you get very highly armored units in this game. Our great swords, for example, have 105 armor right now. So armor piercing against them would be immensely more effective than non-armor piercing damage. Okay, so yeah, you roll to hit, and then you roll with your weapon strength against their armor to see how much damage you actually deal, and it would be a bad idea to put our Outriders into their Spearmen, because their Spearmen are getting almost an extra 50% damage against our Outriders. It would be much better to put them into the Swordsmen, who are only getting 28 damage instead of 40 damage. Their crossbowmen also have missile damage instead of weapon damage, but it's the same sort of idea. There's no roll to hit for a crossbow quarrel, it's just a collision thing. So that's one way where the AI actually doesn't get a bonus on very hard difficulty. Your crossbows are just as capable of hitting as their crossbows are. It means that ranged units are great for damage on high difficulty in this game. And I think those are the basic things going on conceptually with how this stuff works. Look at this, this is incredible. We're harassing to a point where their crossbowmen and their spearmen have been pulled out of position. In fact, the Outriders have pulled 2 units of the spearmen out of position. The mortar is just shelling away. We're shooting at their swordsmen. Their swordsmen are the most intimidating of their ranged units, and we are getting shot by their crossbowmen now. So I think I'm going to let that happen for the moment. I should probably have planned this slightly better, because letting this crossbow unit shoot us for such a long time is pretty crappy. I'm going to be casting my first spell of the combat. You sort of have to get used to casting spells to understand what they do. That's how it works for me, at least. We can right-click and see the spell in the spell browser. This has a bunch of information about it and also actually shows what it looks like. It gives you a somewhat of an idea of what like the time it takes for the spell to cast is. You can see I've cast it now, and we're like 1, 2, 3, 4. About 4 seconds later, our projectiles are actually hitting the ground with this to deal damage. So if we put this where the swordsmen are going to be in like 4 seconds, that should work pretty nicely for us. I'm going to move the crossbowmen down the hill a bit. Here it comes. Pretty much perfect. And that unit just got decimated. Look at that spell cast. So units have hit points and models. And it's a very, very important distinction to make. On this unit, we're getting a red bar, which is showing our hit points relative to the unit. However, if we look at how many models they have right now, they actually still have 88 out of 90 models alive. A lot of these guys are knocked down, but not dead. The spellcast just knocked them down, but they're going to get up again and still be fine. See, here they are, all standing up again. So when this unit gets into combat with one of our units, all of those models are still alive and still able to attack. It looks like the unit is at, like, fighting at less than 2/3 effectiveness, but at the moment, actually, we only killed 2 models, and it's still just as dangerous. The same would go even more so, maybe, for a crossbowman unit, because, like, if we kill some of the swordsmen, it's still only the guys at the front of the unit who can attack us anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter that much, but the crossbowmen can all shoot at us, and so dealing a bunch of hit point damage to the crossbowmen without actually killing individual models is not anywhere near as valuable as killing individual models would be. This is just sort of a problem. It's something that's very difficult to deal with. There's no way to really guarantee that we're going to kill individual models with a spellcast like this. It deals fairly low damage in a wide area, which means we're going to deal some damage to lots of different models rather than killing models outright. Anything else I wanted to say about that? I don't think so. I'm going to try to get these Outriders into their crossbowmen somehow. And let's have our crossbows firing here at these swordsmen. That sounds great. I'm going to also position my swordsmen. I want to receive the swordsman charge with these spearmen and put my swordsmen into their flank. And I'm going to just be charging our greatswords into their swords. If you look at the statistics for these different units, we have comparable melee attack and melee defense, but the big thing that's going on that's different is our greatswords have bonus versus infantry on their weapon strength. They have an extra 9 damage. They also have 23 armor piercing damage out of the 32 total that they're dealing. So they're dealing much, much, much more damage when they hit, and our greatswords have 105 armor, so they're taking very little damage when they get hit. And that adds up to basically them absolutely decimating these swordsmen if we get into combat with them. Outriders are still having trouble dealing with these spearmen. I believe that the mortar gets more accurate as the enemy units get closer. We do have to, of course, worry about friendly fire a little bit with it. I'm currently shooting my crossbowmen into their swordsmen while their swordsmen are facing me, which is the least possible damage our crossbowmen can do shooting any target in the entire fight right now, which makes me wonder why I'm doing that. But at the moment, there's nothing better for them to shoot at. I'm going to switch them to shooting these spearmen now, since the spearmen don't have shields. And I'm going to try to get these Outriders charged into their crossbows so that their crossbows stop shooting at me. I'm going to get one more volley from the mortar into their swordsmen, if possible. Ooh, it would be really nice if we shot them right now while they're standing on top of each other. Don't quite have another spell cast yet. Okay, and now I'm going to switch this mortar to shooting something which is not going to friendly fire against. So let's actually shoot these spearmen out here. I may change that. Something I haven't talked about yet is the morale that's going on. So this white bar is the morale of the unit. And you can see all of the modifiers going on. The unit is getting extra leadership right now because it's charging. So a unit which is charging will get a bonus while it's charging. But it's being damaged by artillery. It's sustained damage. They're currently losing the fight. It's under missile fire. All of these things are giving them significant negatives. And so if we can get their leadership all the way down to 0 and see that they're starting at 57 or whatever. What do these guys start at? 55. 65. If we can get the leadership all the way down to 0, their unit can rout. If their units start routing, it starts to add up extra penalties. I'm actually going to move the greatswords like this and see if I can get the greatswords in from the side. Oh, something worth mentioning. They have a lord. He's the only guy in the field who's armored. He's like a very strong melee unit. By far the best melee unit on the battlefield right now individually. But our unit of greatswords who have armor piercing damage and bonus damage against infantry are going to absolutely annihilate him if we get them in combat with him. So maybe we actually charge there. No, I like this. Okay, let's talk about charging. So charging, obviously it gives us a leadership bonus. We already saw that. Charging into combat, which we're going to do by double right clicking here. It also gives you a bonus for the first 15 seconds of the combat that you're in, and that bonus decays linearly over that time. So at the start of a combat, when you've charged and the enemy hasn't charged, you're getting big bonuses, I believe, to melee attack, weapon strength, melee defense. Shoot, I don't know exactly which attributes you're actually getting bonuses to, but the vague idea is that you do very well in that combat because of having charged. So we want to charge in against these enemies, countercharge basically, so that we get some of the bonuses as well. Spearmen are interesting. Spearmen get charge defense against large foes. When standing and bracing against a charge of large enemies such as cavalry or monsters, this unit will negate the enemy's charge bonus. We're getting charged by infantry right now, so that's irrelevant. So you might think spearmen, spearmen stand with their spears and they don't really charge in. I don't think I've ever seen like a spear unit charging in the same way that a sword unit charges in like a movie, watching a movie. Spears are always like resolute, standing still to receive the charge. It doesn't actually do anything against infantry. We might as well charge, it's more valuable to us. So we're going to do that as well. All of these units who are charging in are going to get significant bonuses to combat for a little while. We're still working on these spearmen. Something really cool here is, so we deployed with elevation on our crossbowmen, which means we can shoot over our lines. And we have this unit right here, which is going to be exposing its flank to us based on how we drew up the lines. We talked about this at the start. Another thing I'd like to talk about right now is arc of fire. If you look at these crossbow quarrels that we just fired, they're arcing like this. And that means that as they come in toward the unit, they're like pretty rapidly going to be hitting the ground. So if they missed by a little way, by the time that they're head height, they're already like very, very close to hitting the ground. They don't spend a long time in the zone of like danger where they might collide with a model here. And the bolts actually have to, quarrels actually have to collide with the model to do anything. Why is the mortar shooting there? That's a mortar, right? It's weird. The lower our arc gets, the further the quarrel travels through a unit in the danger zone, basically. The more likely it is that it's going to be hitting and colliding with the models and dealing damage to them, or killing them. And so having crossbows closer so that they can arc lower, having crossbows deployed without a unit in between them and the enemy so that they can arc lower, these things actually increase the speed at which crossbows deal damage. All right, let's zoom in over here a bit. These crossbowmen have noticed that our outriders are charging in. Our outriders actually, they're like ranged cavalry. It's sort of weird to be using them like this. I'm using them for this somewhat just to show a cavalry charge in this battle. I think it's fine to use them like this, but mostly I'm excited to show you a cavalry charge. Crossbowmen are trying to reposition against these outriders. Apparently they're actually just running away. Let's get this charge into the flank with the greatswords while we're here. The crossbows are still working there. We've got the spearmen out here getting shelled a little bit before they get into combat. Cool. The crossbowmen are running away. What you're going to see here is that our outriders have mass. As they hit the crossbowmen, they're knocking them over and displacing them. Now, when these crossbowmen units are on the ground, they don't get to make melee attacks until they stand up. So one thing that our mass displacing the units did is reduce the ability of the enemy unit to fight back. Our outriders are not incredible in combat, but of course they're fighting against crossbowmen who are also not incredible at combat. Our units are like roughly the same quality. Our outriders are slightly better, but we have significantly fewer models. So as we fight here, the AI is actually going to do just fine. For right now, though, for the next 15 seconds, we have a significant charge bonus, which means that we're going to be winning the combat. And also we've knocked down some of their models, which means that some of their models aren't fighting us. So use of cavalry in this game is often based around cycle charging, which means that we're going to charge in, take advantage of the start of the combat where our cavalry are advantaged, and then we're going to move them out and charge again. Get lots of charges in over and over again. We've got the mass knocking units over, we've got the charge bonus, and these things are adding up to making our cavalry good at doing this. Another thing we can do is, like, now that we've disrupted the crossbowmen, they're not dealing damage for a while, we can bring the outriders back and maybe hit these swordsmen in the back or something like that. I need to move Gelt out of the way of their lord, because he is getting absolutely wrecked. Gelt is definitely not a melee character. Let's put a spellcast. I'm actually going to put it here. Even though this would hit more units, it's going to be more valuable to break one unit than it is to deal a bunch of damage onto lots of different units. In fact, we could even shoot the mortar in here. Damage by artillery -10. I guess they already have the negative on that. Alright, so what's going on here? We've got great swords coming into combat with these swordsmen. The swordsmen are losing currently. There are faster and stronger enemies nearby to them. That would be the great sword. That's giving them an extra leadership penalty. Mousing over these and reading what's actually going on is a great idea to give you give you some idea of what's happening. In melee combat, even in melee unit losing decisively. I don't know why that's happening. This one I have no idea about. I'll have to ask somebody who's like looked at game code. Why would both of these units think that they are losing melee combat? Maybe it's a difficulty thing. I don't know. Alright, so we got our Outriders doing some stuff with their crossbows. This unit's about to break due to the crossbow fire into its flank plus the spellcast. Our greatswords have charged into the swordsman from the flank. Gelt is running away from their lord. He does have the same speed as their lord, I believe, so he'll be able to do this pretty much indefinitely, which is good, because their lord is beating the shit out of him. Excuse me. And our Outriders have charged into their crossbowmen, displaced them for a bit, and are in the fight for a little while, and then they're gonna probably want to withdraw and charge again. We have successfully broken these spearmen, which means we can get a charge into these swordsmen, and I'm going to arc some fire with the crossbows over our spearmen and try to hit their swordsmen. There's going to be some friendly fire here, but I believe that getting the morale penalty into their swordsmen is going to be worth it to get that unit of swordsmen broken as quickly as possible. Let's talk about flanks and rare engagements here. So our greatswords are very strong melee units against infantry. We talked about that a little bit, but right now we're getting charged into our flank, and that means that they're suffering penalties in the combat. I don't remember the exact numbers here. Google it. Penalties for flank and rear engagement in Total War Warhammer 2. I'm sure that you'll find exact numbers, but basically these units fight worse than those units because these units are attacking from the flank instead of the front. And there's a morale penalty for that, I believe. Can we get the morale to show here? Attacked in flank -6. So there's a morale penalty going on there. There's also actually, like, the models fight worse when attacked from the side versus when attacked from the front. It's easier to kill them. Even their armor works less well, so for the greatswords, their armor is one of their biggest things, and that's unfortunate to be missing out on. At the same time, though, our greatswords are hitting their flank. This unit is going to hit their rear, so this should be fine. And our greatswords have so much armor that, you know, there isn't much reason to be concerned. Let's bring these Outriders back out and then charge again, like I said we were going to do. We got the crossbowmen arcing their fire over this unit and try to break them. And our Outriders are going to, I think, charge into combat again now. Gelt's just hanging out. I think that's a good idea. I think that's an excellent thing for him to be doing. I haven't used Plague of Rust yet. It's a very simple spell. It gives the enemy -30 armor for 44 seconds. I've talked about what armor does, so it should be pretty straightforward what that means. One thing that's going on that I do not like in this fight is we've taken a lot of damage on our swordsmen. Our swordsmen are down to 68 out of 90 models. The way that units replenish from damage in this game is that over time, at the end of a turn, if you've ended the turn in a situation where the army can replenish, if you're like in one of your own provinces, if you are encamped, something like that, your unit will get back some percentage of its total health, or total model number actually is what I should say. So getting all of our units like 25% damaged here is a lot better than getting one of our units 75% damaged and the other one's not damaged, because at the end of the turn our army is going to end its turn in a place where it can replenish, and this swordsman unit is going to take a while, like several turns, to replenish fully. So I don't love that. I don't love that the swordsmen are in combat with their lord either. We want to try to address that at some point, but no, for right now, sure, we'll carry on. Okay. Crossbowmen have successfully broken this unit. We're starting to see some chain routing going on here. This unit has not been in melee combat at all yet, but it's been getting hit by the mortar, losing currently friends routing. These things are adding up to give it significantly poor leadership. Lords have leadership auras, and I think it's just barely outside their lord's leadership aura as well. If we mouse over Gelt, we see this big blue circle around him. And if we look at these guys, Lord nearby is giving them +3 leadership. So it's not that he's like giving them a gazillion trillion leadership, but that is significant, and these guys are not currently benefiting that. So I think once they get in range of their lord, they're going to stop wavering, which means I'm going to give them another spellcast to make sure that they get out of here. Really weird things going on in this fight. So we've got like, I tried to charge, but we're like still in melee, but some of our guys are shooting. I don't actually understand what this is. Okay, so we've successfully broken those spearmen. Let's get shooting here because, let's see, mortars don't deal any armor piercing, do they? They deal some armor piercing. I'm thinking about shooting at my great swords. Well, I wouldn't actually be shooting at my great swords. I'm thinking about shooting at the spearmen engaged with the great swords. We might friendly fire, that would suck, but getting them routed as quickly as possible seems good. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna try to pull these swordsmen out of combat with the enemy lord. Oof! Oof! There you go. See how quickly that that mortar fire damages their leadership? So we can be very clever about using the leadership damaging abilities in the right places to end fights quickly. Now, all of these guys who have broken can turn around. You just saw these swordsmen, these spearmen, they've turned around. Oh god, I shot again. I did not want to shoot again. Which means that we're not necessarily done with them, unfortunately. Let's get a charge in with our great swords against this lord. Our great swords are going to be the most effective at dealing damage against it. I'm going to try to bring Balthazar up toward their range unit so I can spellcast against them. I think, well, let's go here actually. Okay, one thing we can do is try to walk away from their lord. He's really slow, and then we can just shoot him with crossbows. Now, we don't want to be charging into these spearmen with our cavalry. Talked about that a bit before. And the mortar at this point is going to be dangerous to shoot at anybody. So I think it's just not going to shoot at anybody. Put the crossmen shooting at their lord like I said I would. And the swordsmen are going to try to kite. Kiting is like... it's an RTS thing, I guess. It happens. Man. That mortar did not get particularly close to it. Oh god, just stop shooting! Did not get particularly close to where I wanted it to shoot. Do we have Plague of Rust yet? Does that reach? Now that we're shooting at him with crossbows, crossbows don't have a ton of armor piercing damage, so getting Plague of Rust on him to reduce his armor is going to deal a lot of damage here. Okay, we've broken their spearmen into their crossbows, please. You can see how much damage our outriders have taken. Even though the only thing that they've done in this combat is try to melee attack a ranged unit. They're just not very good at that. And I think that's immensely apparent from how they're doing. Okay. This unit has just shattered, so the units with the white flags above them are routed, but they can roll to come back into combat. This unit is shattered at this point. Its leadership is so damaged that it's just done forever. Entirely off damage sustained, actually. It's interesting. So we don't have to worry about them coming back again. Trying to run our crossbows away since I sort of let them get out of hand. And we've routed the crossbows with our rear charge from the spearmen. One thing to note that I haven't talked about yet is if you're chasing a routed unit, you're going to prevent it from rallying. So, like, chasing these down is an okay idea. They have just the one unit at the moment, just their lord. Currently, he's okay with how things are going. I think he's rapidly going to change his mind about that as our great swords get in contact with him. And we can see the great swords doing their armor piercing here. I'm going to turn off fire at will for this mortar. Oh, you know? This army is actually going to get gonna retreat this army that we're fighting. So like this unit has 31 models in it, this unit has 12 models in it. These units are going to survive. So chasing them down or shooting them down with the mortar or whatever is actually a pretty good idea. I believe a unit with more than 10% of its models survives. It's a little bit finicky. Sometimes it seems like the numbers is different. But I think that's like the basic idea. Okay, so with all of the enemies routed, their lord still had a bunch of health, but with all of his army gone, he had so many leadership penalties on him that he was not going to stick around long. We now enter cleanup phase of the battle. Like I said, if these units leave the field still alive, they're going to be able to replenish and fight us again another day. So we want to deal some damage to them as the fight is ending, ideally. They'll replenish so quickly. In this campaign situation in particular, we're not going to fight this army again for several turns, so anything that we don't kill will replenish almost entirely. So we want to kill units outright here, where possible. But yeah, basically, this battle's over. If you don't really enjoy watching your guys attack routed units, it's not like you have to sit here and watch this happen at the end of fights. It's often a pretty insignificant thing. I don't know, it can be fun. You can turn the speed up if you want. I've been playing it one-time speed so that I can explain everything in excruciating detail nonstop, but you don't have to play at one-time speed. And that was our fight. It went pretty well. Something I want to mention about retreating is that if you kill the enemy lord, the enemy does get the option to recruit a new lord for the army. They don't have to like be in their territory or anything like that. So if they have a level 9 enemy lord or something like that and you kill it, they'll get a level 1 enemy lord in its place probably. And that can be cool. There's a bug in the game right now, which I have a mod to fix, where if you beat an army, what's meant to happen is that they get to retreat 1 time per turn. If you beat an army twice in the same turn, it can't retreat the second time, it just gets wiped out, it's gone. If you're attacking an army and you kill its lord, the game forgets how many times the army has retreated in a turn. So if you attack it, make it retreat once, and then in the second fight you kill the lord and it retreats again, the game will actually let it retreat instead of wiping it out like it's meant to. It's, we're gonna get him. There's really no reason to get him. We get a little... I'm not even sure that you do get extra experience for kills at the end of these fights. I don't know. We're trying to get him. So I have a mod that fixes that so that killing lords does not prevent you from properly destroying armies. We took some damage. I think I played this fight a little bit carelessly. Oh, we got him. In trying to explain everything, I like missed a couple of tricks, but you saw how much depth there was and how many cool things we could try to maneuver to do. Even in a fight with mostly tier 1 units and only 7 versus 6 on the battlefield. This game is immensely deep and satisfying to play and very, very enjoyable to try to work out all the little tricks that are going on in the fight. So we killed in a ratio of almost 1-4, which is decent. We took half damage on our outriders and swordsmen in particular. It's going to take a while for them to replenish. You can see the kills for the different units. Our outriders got a lot of kills. Some of that's because at the end of the fight they got to chase down and are fast enough to actually catch up with units. Great swords got quite a few. The mortar and the crossbows contributed a good amount from range. See the Gelt only got 38 kills. I feel like that's underrepresenting how much he did, because his spellcasts, like I said, they were dealing a lot of damage in AoEs. They weren't necessarily killing models, but then once the models got into combat with us, they had lower HP and died more rapidly. At the end of fights, we get to choose a few different options. These are different depending on what faction you have. We can take on captives to replenish our guys. You can see there's a little yellow bar showing how much replenishment we get out of this. We can kill the captives for +4 leadership for the next 5 turns. This is a buff which, doing this multiple times will extend how long it lasts. You don't like get to kill captives twice in a turn and then you get +8 leadership for 5 turns. You get +4 leadership for 10 turns if you do that. And we can also pardon the captives for 290 treasury. However, for the Empire, if we pardon captives, it makes our casualty replenishment rate lower, which means that it will take much longer to get our outriders and our swordsmen back. This number is worse than it seems like it is. It says casualty replenishment rate minus 5%. What that means is not that you get 19/20ths as many models replenished. What that means is that usually the swordsmen are replenishing, say, 10% of their models a turn, and now they're replenishing 5% of their models per turn. So it's a significant change. What you do on this screen will give you diplomacy penalties or bonuses with other factions. Like if another faction doesn't like these guys at all, if I execute the captives, the other faction is going to get a little diplomacy bonus with me. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're fighting against a like sort of evil aligned faction and you're thinking about releasing their captives, you might want to reconsider when you think about all your allies, and they wouldn't like that very much. I might just take the unit replenishment here to try to get my guys back up in health. So the enemy army runs away. We've completed our mission, gets us another 1,000 gold. Our next mission is to occupy Grunberg. These missions are very tutorialized. We have a new follower. I'll talk about the Lord stuff, but Lord stuff next. But yeah, we get followers. We have a new arcane item. These things can be found in battles.
Let us begin.
And the enemy army has run away. Oh wow, we actually got all but one of their units. It's pretty good. Balthazar Gelt, you'll notice that these guys have a little cross with a red mark through it here. Army is not replenishing because it's in foreign territory. This is the border on the strategic map right here. We can move after combat. That's allowed. We can initiate as many combats as we have movement for every turn, stuff like that. So we can just drop back into our territory, and now we have replenishment going. You can see that like we're only replenishing 7 troops per turn, so we're replenishing about like 8% per turn, which means that if we had pardoned the captives, we'd be losing more than half of our replenishment per turn. It's going to take a little while before those swordsmen get back in business. I can recruit because I'm in territory, and I'm in one of the stances that allows me to. Different factions have different stances that armies can be in, and some of them will not allow recruit. We could march, for example, which gives us more movement range, but it does disable recruitment, and we're not allowed to retreat from battles, and if we get into battle, our vigor is going to be tired. That battle wasn't long enough that I actually talked about vigor at all. As you run around in a battle, though, and do lots of stuff, you get tired, and that gives you penalties to your unit's performance. Standing still with units for a while in a battle will actually replenish their vigor. Yeah, I didn't think to mention that, sorry. So we have 3 local recruitment available. You can increase that with buildings and stuff. I was talking about building provinces, and this is a situation where you can specialize a province for recruitment and make it so much more recruitment's available. I'm going to grab 3 free company. We're not going to continue this campaign, so we don't need to get into exactly what they do, but they're the most expensive unit and generally the most effective unit. That's why they cost the most. And so since it's not like we have a certain limit of gold we can spend, but a certain number of units we can grab, and we want to get this army strong fast so we can get on with the campaign, we're going to just get the best units. Free company fit into early game armies pretty well, in my opinion. They start to fall off rapidly. They don't have that much damage. They don't have armor piercing. In fact, it says on them weak against armor. What does that even mean? Can hardly punch through armor. Armor piercing missile damage 2. So it just means that they don't have much armor piercing. Wait. And that's almost it. We have an office slot available. I don't want to talk too much about Empire office slots because it's Empire specific, but I'm gonna put this guy into... Actually, I will show you because this is sort of silly. We were building that, right? It cost 1,600. Office slots, you can change guys around all the time. So for this turn, we're gonna make him the Castellan Engineer, minus 10% construction cost. And now costs us 1440 gold to build that instead. And then next turn we could make him the treasurer instead. Give us income from all buildings and in all of our provinces. Just tweak that around every turn to make sure that you're getting the most economy possible. The Empire is one of the fiddliest factions in terms of offices in the entire game. It might be the most fiddly. It's very fiddly. Okay, and we do get experience in this game. So Balthazar Gelt has leveled up. None of our units have leveled up yet, but these do track experience. The Greatsword's got about half a level, and as they level up, they'll get more melee attack, melee defense, and leadership. For range units, you get other stuff for range units. You'll see. You can always look at an army and compare units. So select one and mouse over another. And so if you want to see exactly which bonuses a veteran unit is getting versus a non-veteran unit, if you have a unit which has leveled up a few times, you can click on it and then mouse over a unit which hasn't leveled up yet and see the difference. Yeah, so Gelt has leveled up.
I am ready. Are you?
Lords level quite rapidly early in the game. They get a lot of experience from just doing battles. Even if the battle isn't that large a battle, they'll get a big chunk of flat experience. So these guys level quite quickly. You can see that we can give this guy armor, weapon, talisman, enchanted item, mount, and an arcane item. We need to find a wand of jet. The magic items that you find in this game are like pretty random. In different campaigns you'll find different magic items, so you have to adapt to what's going on. The Wand of Jet gives us a ability we can use which lasts for 57 seconds and increases how much magic we have available to us and how quickly it's refilling in the fight. But it makes it so that our abilities take longer to come off cooldown. So that's something that we can use at the right times in fights, and we have to think about when the right times to do that are. We also got a Messenger, which gives us plus 6% campaign movement range, and that applies to the entire army. So this is actually a significantly large deal. It's a big deal to be able to move far with armies. Get them to the fights that they need to get to faster. And then we have skills, and every time we level up, we get another skill point. Legendary Lords have unique skill trees, which sometimes have some very, very powerful skills available to them. Legendary Lords also, I'm not sure if this is true for every single one of them, but I'm not sure if every single one of them has at least one quest, but we're going to say that at least the vast majority of them have at least one quest. So this says that this quest will automatically begin at rank 8. Once Balthazar Gelt gets to rank 8, we're going to get a little prompt. It will say, hey, we're starting this quest for the Cloak of Molten Metal. The first thing you have to do is do this thing. And as we go through that entire quest, eventually we will get the Cloak of Molten Metal. Yes, so that's the thing. We've got an Amulet of Seagold. This quest starts at rank 13. We got a Staff of Volans, which starts at rank 18 as well. We can get mounts for Gelt. If you have mounts, you can actually choose whether you want to be mounted or not in battles before the battle starts. And we've got all sorts of other skills. I'm not going to get all the way into this. I'm just going to say, generally speaking, on very hard, I think that getting melee attack and melee defense for the entire army is immensely valuable to try to counter the fact that the AI has flat bonuses for their troops. This will actually make it so your infantry units can go toe-to-toe with the AI's infantry units, which is very useful to have. And just in general, I like the army-wide buffs on my lords, as long as they're applying to units we actually have a lot of. So 12% missile damage for missile infantry is in the army, and 20% ammunition is great too. I didn't even talk about ammunition in that last fight, I just realized. The third bar that you're seeing on range units, though, is their ammunition. And then campaign movement range is very important, so getting plus 10% on that is important too. I don't need campaign movement range next turn because I'm just going to move to Grunberg, so I'm going to take Inspiring Presence for an extra 5 on the character's aura leadership effect. Keep in mind that before it was plus 3, so now it's plus 8, so it's quite a lot more. And yeah, I think that's actually the turn. An hour and 20 minutes, nice. So I hope you enjoyed watching this turn of this campaign. If you really, really, really loved it and want to like see a full campaign, I'm playing a Wood Elves campaign over on Twitch, and you can look through the VODs on that. I'm planning to have some actual Total War YouTube content, like a YouTube campaign at some point, but it's not done yet. I've still been learning the game and experimenting and playing on Twitch and the like. So that doesn't exist right now, but leave me a comment if you really want to see that. Inspire me to do it. Being loud about something you want is an excellent way to make content creators actually make that thing in general on the internet. Okay. Yeah, I hope that this has made clear why this game is so awesome, and also I hope that I was able to explain why some things are happening the way that they're happening, and give you a good starting off point to making some really cool and interesting decisions which are favorable to you in the campaign. So, go play Total War, Warhammer 2. It's really good. I've been Joe on Ribs. Thanks for tuning in. I have links to my Discord, my Twitch channel, my Patreon, all that stuff below the video if you want to check that out or support more videos. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.